Hello, welcome to Now Tell Us. Now, this is a place where people come and tell us stories. They come and give us inspiration. They come and educate us on a subject. They come and we just have a conversation that is interesting. And always we have great guests with us and a great guest like today's. And before we get started, I want to know, do you have a dream? I have a dream myself. And I actually started dreaming when I was a small child, going to kindergarten, primary school. And I used to enjoy watching TV, watching those cartoons. Do you love cartoons? I love cartoons. And one of the cartoons that I used to love watching was Mickey Mouse, and was coming from a guy known as Disney, Walt Disney. Now, our guest today has a story about Walt Disney and anything to do with Disneyland. He's actually known as Dr. Disneyland, but his real name he's going to tell us right now. Welcome to the show, Dr. Disneyland.
Well, hello, Anthony. How are you today?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm doing great, and I appreciate that introduction. And I love that you start by talking about dreams and being a kid and watching cartoons, because I think we all have those memories. And if we can go back to what it was like to be a child and those earliest memories, we can tap in to some of those fondest memories.
Yeah. When you were young, everything was possible. I mean, there's nothing that was unachievable. I believed that I could fly when I was a kid. I actually
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
actually attempted sometimes to fly. I won't tell you what happened thereafter.
Yeah. Yeah, the sky was the limit. And
Mhm.
Walt Disney once said, "Why do we have to grow up?" And he believed in unlimited childlike possibilities, and I think that's what he tapped into. The child in all of us, no matter the age.
Mm, beautiful. And because I know you're very passionate about Disneyland and Walt Disney, now let's know a bit about you. Where are you from? And let's know how that passion came to be.
So I live in Southern California, about 30 miles from Disneyland, and I've been in higher education for more than 2 decades. Teach the world's only accredited college course on the history of Disneyland. And Anthony, that course isn't about taking students and putting them on a roller coaster at an amusement park and giving them an easy A. No, the reason why I wanted to teach that class was to get students and now readers of my best-selling books and audiences in my keynote motivational inspirational speeches to understand, if you have a dream, if you have a goal, if you want to level up and be successful, you're inevitably going to have to embrace conflict. You're going to have to do hard things. You're going to have to overcome obstacles. You're going to have to face adversity. And Walt Disney, like all of us, wasn't born successful, had a difficult childhood, failed more often than he succeeded. And he built Disneyland for the purpose of telling stories, stories that I believe are challenging us to go out after our magical day at the Magic Kingdom to then go out and live our own great story. And every great story requires what? Conflict. And so if you're dealing with difficulty and conflict in your life today, I want to challenge you to reframe that and just understand you're living a great story. How can you leverage that to level up in your life?
Hmm. And I'm curious to know, how did it all start for you with your interest in telling this story and in teaching the course?
So My first trip to Disneyland wasn't until August of 1988, and I was excited to go, but was actually really disappointed. I hated that first trip because I didn't know anything about it. I stumbled in around 11 in the morning on a Sunday in August. Was excited to ride the first, newest, latest, greatest attraction, which back then was Star Tours in Tomorrowland,
Mm-hmm.
and waited more than 3 hours for my first Disneyland ride. And if any of our listeners have been to a Disney park, they probably know what I'm talking about, because you think of a Disney park, you think of really long lines. And by the time I had experienced that first attraction, it's now 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's even more crowded. It's hot. By the time I was done with that day, I wanted nothing to do with Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
But I stayed in California long enough to realize for some reason that park really matters here.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that locals have in common with everyone else. People just love to go over and over and over again. And so I'm insatiably curious.
Mm-hmm.
Walt was once asked, what does it take to be successful? And Walt never got past ninth grade in terms of his own formal education. And so he said, well, I think it just takes four C's. And for Walt, those four C's of success were courage, confidence, consistency, and curiosity. And fortunately, I've always been curious. And so, because everyone else loved Disneyland and I hated my first trip, I got curious. What does everybody else love about it? And Jeff hated. And so I started doing my research and discovered, like I said, Walt wasn't born successful, had more failures than successes. And even at age 53, when he went to build Disneyland, everyone doubted. No one thought it was going to work. Most, to include his own wife and his own brother, thought that the park was going to be bankrupt, shuttered, and forgotten in 6 months or less. And so I just fell in love with that story.
Hmm.
And I came to realize, wow, if it's something that everybody loves here, especially in Southern California, I could leverage that and challenge the students that I was working with. I could leverage that and use it to help them achieve their own goals, their own dreams, and their own success.
Hmm. That's interesting. Now, what grade or what level are you? Is the course for? I mean, where do you teach?
So I was at California Baptist University in Riverside, California, and it was a 400 level course, qualified for U.S. history credit. Um, but fortunately, my writing and speaking has been so successful that I was actually able to retire from higher ed last January, and now I write and speak full time. And so, if anyone's interested in taking the class, they can actually do it online now from anywhere in the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. And another thing I want to know: at what age were you when you went to that ride? When you went to that visit, and then everything changed for you? Were you in school or were you?
Yeah, I was in grad school up in the Bay Area at the time, and so I was in my mid 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and again hated it, but went back a second time 3 years later. But in between, I did my research and was curious because, like I said, everyone else loved it. Jeff hated it. And it was in doing that research that I fell in love with the Walt Disney story. And it was on the second visit that I fell in love, not just with Walt's story, but fell in love with the park and came to appreciate it at a completely different level. Walt Disney, for all of his successes, whether it's Mickey Mouse, whether it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or even Disneyland, Walt most wanted to be remembered as a storyteller. And in fact, he built Disneyland for the purpose of telling stories. And so when I walked into the park, I realized Walt was challenging me to no longer be a passive spectator in my life story, but rather challenging me to be an active participant in my own great story.
Mm.
And I came to see the park no longer as an escape, but as an example, and no longer the place where dreams come true, but as a place showing me how to then go out and make my own dreams come true.
Yeah, and we are glad that you're here sharing with us this information, the inspiration that you got from there. And at this point, I want to thank each and every person who's watching and those who get to watch us later on. Thank you very much for being here. Please remember to share this with as many people as you possibly can. And we are going to be inspired and we are going to go after our dreams and we are going to achieve our dreams. Now, let's dive deeper into the life lessons from Walt Disney, coming from Jeff.
Yeah, and so we're talking about Walt's life again. Not born successful, had an impoverished childhood, difficult relationship with his father. People don't realize Walt Disney was bankrupt at age 21, nearly 100 years ago, 1923,
Mm-hmm,
with his first studio, Laugh-O-Gram Studio, in Kansas City, Missouri. And it was that financial failure, it was that bankruptcy that compelled him to come to California.
mm-hmm,
And wherever you are today in your life, in your career, in your journey, think about where Walt was again nearly 100 years ago in Kansas City, and he had a choice to make. He could have stayed stuck. He could have stayed in Kansas City. That would have been the safer option. It's where he had friends. It's where he had family, but it's also where he would have been giving up.
mm-hmm,
But rather than giving up, Walt made the courageous choice, and that was he boarded a train. He boarded a train bound for California. But Anthony, when he boarded that train, he did so with all of $40, a single suitcase, and get this, a one-way ticket. And
mm,
I talk about that as being an all in mindset. And
mm-hmm,
so, whatever you want to achieve today, whatever your dream might be, ask yourself, have you boarded the proverbial train? Are you all in $40 single suitcase, one way ticket? And I think all of us at some point in our life have to make that sort of commitment when it comes to our own goals, our own dreams, and our own success. You got to go all in. Again, $40 single suitcase, one way ticket.
mm-hmm,
And Walt did that following the bankruptcy and the financial failure in Kansas City. And if he doesn't go bankrupt, who knows? Maybe he spends the rest of his life in Kansas City.
mm-hmm,
Maybe he spends the rest of his life doing what he had been doing with Laugh-O-Gram Studio, which was only creating animation advertisements, working with the local dentist, teaching children how to brush their teeth. In
mm-hmm,
other words, that failure worked for him, not against him. And
mm,
then once he gets to California, he, with his brother Roy, founds the second studio, the Disney Brothers Studio, that today is the largest entertainment company anywhere in the world. So
mm,
again, the failure worked for him, not against him.
mm. And that reminds us of the famous saying, when one door closes, another one opens.
Absolutely.
Now, the
Yep.
thing that I like imagining is that doors don't just open. Now, we may be advanced today. We may be living in places where things are automatic, but not really. For a door to open in front of you, even if it's using sensors, you've got to be closer to it. And most of the doors, you've got to go there yourself and open it. So when one door closes, as Jeff says, it cannot always be a negative thing in your life. There could be some positive thing that is waiting for you to take an action towards the direction of your dream. I hope you
Yeah,
agree.
and I think the key here is to have a bigger vision for your future
Mm-hmm,
than you have the pain from your past.
mm-hmm,
And Walt Disney's wife Lily went on record to say Walt was never beaten at anything. He was constantly and consistently moving forward into the future. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't matter whether he went bankrupt at age 21 in 1923. It didn't matter whether he lost his first successful cartoon character, which was not Mickey Mouse, by the way. He
Which one?
created a little character by the name of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and he would lose Oswald in a trademark distribution dispute with Universal. And it was only after losing Oswald and he's staring bankruptcy in the face all over again, Tony, that he
Mm-hmm.
has been forced to come up with Mickey Mouse. It's again, he doesn't stay stuck in the past. He's not looking backwards. He isn't going to be tied to that pain. He's going to have a bigger vision for the future and keep moving forward into that future.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Walt shows us the way you open those doors is by facing forward as opposed to keep reliving the stories and the pain from the past over and over and over again.
Yeah, because most of us are living yesterdays. I mean, so a person hurt me. I failed in school. Maybe my parents were not the best parents. Maybe they mistreated me, and we keep remembering that person who let us down.
Yes,
That person who broke my heart. Now you remind us that we should not be focusing on that. We should be focusing in the future, on the bigger
absolutely.
the future.
If you focus on your past, then
Mm-hmm.
the pain of that past inevitably is going to keep cycling back and repeating itself over and over again. Instead, have a bigger vision for your future
Mm-hmm.
and focus on what you want and create an elevated emotion and an elevated state around the vision for that future. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what Walt was constantly doing. He knew that he was going to be successful once he arrived in California, which is why he purchased the one-way ticket. He wasn't
Mm-hmm.
going back to Kansas City. He wasn't going to go back to the bankruptcy. Once he lost Oswald, he didn't care that the rights belonged to Universal. He was moving on to bigger and better characters with Mickey Mouse, who to this day remains the most popular and profitable cartoon in animation history. Same with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the world's first full length animated feature film, which many believe is the most profitable film that Hollywood has ever produced. And even from there, he goes on to create the world's first theme park that most people, to include his own wife and his own brother, think is going to be bankrupt, shuttered, and forgotten in 6 months or less.
Mm-hmm.
Walt rises above that resistance. He rises above those doubters because, again, he has a vision for the future that's bigger than the doubts, bigger than his past, and he moves into that future and makes his world and our world a better place as a result.
Mm. And that's a reminder to all the listeners, every viewer, have a vision of your future. Now, if you have a dream, there's something that you imagine you could be, you could go after. Have a vision of it and then go after it. Now, at this point, in the thought of, has Jeff gone some through some experiences himself that left him challenged, where he met obstacles and he had to employ these lessons that we are learning?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. So, Anthony, I had wanted to teach a college course on the history of Disneyland for years, and I was a little afraid to ask about that
Mm-hmm.
because I'll be honest, it's a Mickey Mouse idea, right? A college course on the history of an amusement park. But I finally
Interesting.
had the courage to ask about it. And
Yeah.
Walt Disney once said, all of our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. And I had the courage finally to pursue it worked on it for an entire year, gave the first lecture. The students absolutely loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very next day, I was diagnosed with a life-threatening brain tumor.
Mm.
And the neurosurgeon at Cedar Sinai Hospital in downtown Los Angeles said to me, "It's life-threatening. It's got to come out. You have the weekend to get your affairs in order. Today's Friday. You need to be back here on Tuesday for brain surgery."
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 2 month recovery, which meant the class, which had just started, we had held class for all of one day. It meant the class that I had dreamed of for years would be immediately canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a hard decision because I was all in on teaching those students $40 single suitcase one way ticket. And I looked the neurosurgeon in the eye and I said, "Sorry, doc, but that operation on Tuesday is not going to happen." And
Mm.
so I delayed surgery for 2.5 months so I could teach my Mickey Mouse course on the history of Disneyland. And everybody thought I was nuts.
Uh,
Everyone.
I wouldn't. I mean, that's a story I wouldn't take. I mean, you postpone your own brain surgery.
Yes.
Or just
Yeah. But again, the class wasn't about the amusement park. The class
okay.
was about risk and adversity and obstacles in order to see your own dreams come true.
Mm-hmm.
I instantly realized I'm no longer teaching that. This was a chance for me to live that. And how could I possibly walk away from that example at the first opportunity?
Mm.
And so I delayed the surgery. I taught the class, had the surgery again 2.5 months later, and then went on to write what became a best-selling book about it, The Wisdom of Walt: Leadership Lessons from the Happiest Place on Earth. Then a second book 2.5 years later. And now I'm not even in higher education because I travel the country and the world giving inspirational and motivational speeches. Yes, based on Walt Disney, Disneyland, and Walt Disney World, but really it's about story and conflict and obstacles and adversity and how we have to face hard and difficult things in order to live our own great story.
Wow, I'm speechless at this point. Now, the story of delayed surgery. But I guess you had been assured that there was no bigger risk in the delay of the operation. Let me hope so.
No, I mean, the neurosurgeon thought I was nuts, thought I was crazy. He wasn't happy about it. He told me what the risks were, but I had decided that, again, I was all in on teaching this class. There was no going back.
Hmm. So I want to believe that you're that person who says that we only live once. So you've got to live the life no matter what it takes, and in case of anything. But anyway, we keep going. For those who may be joining us right now, we are with Jeff Barnes discussing about the life lessons from Walt Disney. And Jeff is a speaker, is an author, and he's been living through these stories, these lessons, and he's experienced the lessons that he's teaching us right now. And the books. At what point did you write? I mean, from the time that you started on the story of Walt Disney and you started the course, did you immediately go into writing the books, or at what point did the inspiration come for you to now put it in writing?
Well, funny enough, Anthony, I knew after that second trip to Disneyland way back in 1991
Mm-hmm.
that at some point in my life I was going to write a book about Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
That's how inspired I was by Walt's life and story and how changed I was by that second trip to the park, even though I hated it so much
Mm,
on the first visit. The
mhm,
challenge was I was I was beset by limiting beliefs. Who was I to write a book? I didn't know how to write a book. No one would care if I did write a book. How would I market it? How would I publish it? How would I sell it? On and on and on, those limiting beliefs went for more than 2 decades.
mhm,
But then, after I got sick, taught the course, and had the surgery, 2 decades of procrastination and limiting beliefs got wiped out in 142 days. I
mm,
went from who am I to write this book, and 2 decades of, again, procrastination and limiting beliefs, to finishing the first book in 142 days.
142 days. That's 4 months and something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, again,
Mm,
um, that's what happens when we embrace conflict.
mhm,
And the conflict at that point was the brain tumor. And on
mm,
the other side of that conflict, I just didn't care. All of
mhm,
a sudden, the who am I and I don't know how, and how, you know no one will care. All of that just vanished.
mm,
And I had a message, a story, a passion that just blew through all of that BS.
mhm. Wow. So, for you who's listening, who's watching, and everybody who gets to listen or watch after we are through, now, if you have been having a dream that has been there for many years, you've been procrastinating, you've been having some limiting beliefs, this has been your episode to remind you that your dream is still possible. You've got to just wake up one day and say, I'm going to do it, just
Yeah.
like Jeff did it.
And wake up before you get diagnosed with a life-threatening brain tumor.
Wake up today where you're healthy and breathing and
Yes.
everything is okay. Okay, we understand that the situations in the world uh, are bad. Now, they were worse 2 years back, but even now they are not so good. But don't wait for that perfect day, because there may be never a perfect day for you to
There's
get
never
started.
going to be a perfect day. The perfect day is today.
The perfect day is today.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you very, very, very much, Jeff. We really appreciate you and everything that you've shared with us. Now, you mentioned about people learning from the lessons that you teach, or people getting your books. How can people connect with you? Even just hearing more stories from you.
Yeah. So people can find me at thewisdomofwalt.com, and they can email me, Jeff at thewisdomofwalt.com. I have a free Wednesdays with Walt email newsletter that goes out. It's completely free of charge, where I share life lessons from Walt Disneyland, Walt Disney World. The books you can get information about the books on my website. They're available on Amazon, whether it's soft cover, Kindle ebooks, audio books, and you can also find me on Instagram at Dr. Disneyland, Facebook, Jeff Barnes. And I would love to, connect with anyone who is looking for either, a personal one-on-one connection, or if you're looking to hire an inspirational, motivational speaker for your event. Because, again, I travel the country, travel the world, inspiring audiences to get up off of their park bench like Walt did when he dreamed of Disneyland, a place where parents and children can have fun together. And I believe every individual, every organization has some sort of thought, some sort of idea that can change maybe not the world, but at least your world. And we simply need that push, that motivation, that inspiration to start taking action.
Hmm. Thank you very much. So, once again, to all those who are listening or watching, the website is www.thewisdomofworld.com. Get to connect with Jeff and take the course, get the books, or just be around Jeff. He's a great person to be around.
Would love to connect with anyone.
Okay, that's wonderful. So that's just about it for today at Now Tell Us. We remind people before we go, I think, um, what did that person say? Too bad Disney went. Besides, it seems an interesting conversation. Went woke. I mean, we lost that. Okay. Yes, we thank all of you who have been with us, though those who are giving us feedback, we really appreciate. So Charles says, great stuff, Jeffrey, passionate story and full of inspiration. All the best going forward. Thank you very much, Charles. We really appreciate Andy Charles. We thank you, and every other person who's with us here, and those who get to watch after we are through. Thank you. We appreciate feedback, and please remember to share it with all your friends. And now, before we go, we would like Jeff to leave us with a few words that we should always remember. It's your time, Jeff.
All right. So, Walt, the idea for Disneyland came when Walt would take his daughters on Saturday afternoons to a merry-go-round in Griffith Park in downtown Los Angeles, and they would ride the merry-go-round. Walt would sit on a bench, and it was there that he had the idea for a place where parents and children could have fun together.
Mm-hmm.
And we change our world with our ideas. And so, whatever idea you have today, get up off of your park bench, just like Walt Disney did decades ago. Get up off of your park bench, start taking action, and start changing at least your world. Leave the past behind and move forward into a much greater future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. In other words, all those of you who are watching, be the change that you want to see in this world. Yes, that's about it. And it's been a wonderful time together. And I have been your host, Anthony Moirore. And together with Jeff Barnes, we are saying bye for now. Bye bye.
Thank you.